So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yeshayahu the prophet, we then read very precisely the 61st chapter, where you find the completion of the spring feast and also the mentioning of the autumn feast. Obviously, when the Messiah, the Savior, Yahweh Yeshua, came, he was then obviously reading these, understanding this layer related with himself, as he was explaining then the situations related with Leviticus the 23rd chapter from the first verse through the 21st verse. But then there is then a very important information regarding the system of Bitcoin, a virtual system where then the US government was fighting against it some time ago, but then they were able to establish a linker. Let's then evaluate what this is going to cause. Previously, Bitcoin was involved with the wealth of gold. For instance, the gold standard was adopted in Bitcoin. But then, US was against it. And many of the countries were, because we are dealing with scandalized countries trying to control the liberty of trade in the world. But the holy instructions are teaching us otherwise. Trade and merchantship must be above government. Never is going to be otherwise. It was otherwise for 1,000 years, but we are no longer during the times of the 1,000 years of deceit, are we? We are after 2009, and the time of deceit has ended, and merchantships. And then the system of liberty of trade is returning. So then, quite a few months ago it was explained the linker. It lacks a linker with these new systems. And then the linker was established. Some 24 hours to 48 hours ago, it was then used as a linker. USD is then the measure of the standard, where then Bitcoin has then its value. These then we must link a section of the holy instruction related with this, and you find the despised one, the 21st verse of the 11th chapter, known then as United States. And then we jump from this point, because we are not there yet. The nations have not rejected USA yet. There are some nations not using USD anymore. But we are speaking despising as system and military. So then, we have a portion of the information. When we read, for instance, the verse 28th verse of the 11th chapter, you find, and then the despised one shalt prosper, and until the end of the time, then wilt return with great wealth. It was then obviously established because the Bitcoin system and a lot of the virtual monetary systems were then generated after 2009. Some of them were around that time. And Bitcoin was generated then or invented by an Asian person, and then obviously US is linked with an Asiatic system where they're going to get much wealth. Now comes the problem with the military. US has then led a coalition of many countries, and they are trying to fight against Islam. The very core of the sons of Ishmael. A person can simply understand it won't work. US is not interested in bringing peace, the rigid, but they bring friction. And then because of this, obviously when we read the Holy Instructions, the despised one title is coming very shortly. So then why US can't live in peace within its means? Because they were granted the leadership of the world for roughly 200 years. The problem is we are outside of the 1,000 years of deceit, and the Creator has His own agenda and must be completed. So either we obey the Creator's agenda or US's agenda. So what's going on as far as the economy of US? As many people can understand, they are broken. Now for many years, what has led the economy to grow? Arms industry mostly, wars, conflicts, destruction. So then, what is then the link of the 28th chapter and the 21st chapter? We can simply understand. As US then is linking up with the Chinese system and the Asiatic system and virtual monetary systems, as US then becomes the linker as it was then explained before, will to generate much wealth, and it's on the 28th verse of the 11th chapter. However, what's going to bring then the retrieval of the ships? Read the 30th verse. It's simply wars, squandering the wealth in wars. Nations are joining up with United States, for instance, France, Germany, Turkey, Australia, and many others. As US then is leading these new war fronts, obviously is going to be spent untold amounts of wealth. And nations such as Great Britain, trying to adjust themselves with such a failure in their government of the last period of the liberals, then they are trying to get their acts together, knowing the Gulf War was a blunt. Tony Blair at the time, as the Prime Minister, unfortunately made a mistake of going to war without proper clearance. Now we find this new leadership of America trying then to round up the other countries with some wealth of their own and then lead them into war. Do they think it is going to work? No, it won't. It won't, because we have already the answer. The despised one being the very linking place with the covenant. I must understand, where does it lead? Why then we are linking with the covenant? Because the non-believing Hebrews, they are using the United States for their purposes of then rebuilding the temple in Israel. And then because Israel wants then the new Levite leadership to do precisely as they used to do, and then becoming obviously the desolation. We must then understand why the Messiah spoke these words in the 24th chapter of Metichiahu, the abomination that makes desolate. Because of the institution of the first service, services of sacrifices. After the completion of the spring feast, sacrifices involving the Holy Creator is then an abomination. Because the first section was completed, and we are during the time of the second tabernacle services, where the first holy seat is going to be on the land of Cush, precisely as Yeshayahu the prophet prophesied. So then, since we are in the 11th chapter of Daniel, what can we understand of the linker? USD is going to be linked up with many other systems, and they will to receive much wealth, unfortunately squandered in wars. Thus these must lead to the retrieval of their military, and they will to retrieve with much anger. So then, what is going on with the other nations then? For instance, France, Great Britain. Why are they joining themselves with these, knowing they can't fight against Islam? Not only this, but China holds 57% of the world's trade by itself, without counting, for instance, the Soviet Union and the other nations linked up with China, and China is the linker of the Pacific, where then the mostly of the wealth of the world is at. Where do we find this information? Very precisely, you find in Revelation. Read, for instance, the 8th chapter. Where do you find then the third part of the earth's ship? You find on Asia. So then there is a linker going on over there, and China holds then 57%, and US is going to squander their wealth in wars. So whosoever is joining up, the Americans are not very smart, are they? France, for instance, has a busted government, yet they are going to fight then against those people in Iraq. It doesn't make truly any sense. So then, let's then understand, for instance, Australia. The last PM of Australia also was deposed because she went to China last year, and then there was so much going on over there. Then she came back wanting to buy submarines and airplanes and so on and so forth, and she was deposed. So is also Australia is going to send part of their wealth then squander in wars? Or should these nations get together and simply protect the civilians in many of these countries, providing them a path so they can exit the war zone? Another point, Scotland must then vote on Thursday. Extremely important situation, because it's going to prove themselves as then what will to be a nation very wise in linking up with China. Some say, well, if they do have an independent country, what is it going to do then with the military, and then with their monetary system, and then the postal services? Those situations are minute. The main point is having China as friends and as a trade partner. It's already simply 50% of the whole trouble then resolved. Obviously, China will use the Scots for a very nice place for the distribution center of their own products. So then, Scotland has a portion of oil and gas, and China is searching for more of energy. And what does it take for the nation then to join up with China and begin exportation instantly? China can provide some ships, they can provide basic military in exchange for these wealth of oil and gas, and they can adopt any kind of a monetary system they want. They can mint their own money. Because Great Britain is involved with the United States in the new coalition. As these wars are going to drag on for a long time, you can be sure of it, it is extremely expensive. Can the Scots put up with this nonsense of wars in many fronts? There is trouble with Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, problems in Somalia, in many other countries where the US then is overextending itself and they can't do by themselves, and they then drag other countries in their own schemes, and then when the time of payment comes, then every nation must give their share, and it won't be very nice because it will be beyond their means. Squandering their wealth because of stupid wars. There are other ways of fighting a war. The US wants to control the Islamic world. They do not want to defeat them, they want to control them. And they can't do it because they are the sons of Ishmael. They have a promise. So then, was a very great and important day, yesterday and today, because we already have an understanding of linker of the Pacific, the Atlantic. There is an understanding very solid of the 28th verse to the 30th verse. And there is an understanding also the 21st regarding then the despised one and then the covenants. So then the first chapter of Ezekiel and the machine with many round pieces. They are absolutely working together as a clock. Synchronisms of events. What can we expect next? As Egypt then unfortunately is thinking and joining up with the coalition, it won't work. Plain truth. Let's then read why. Because the Northern Kingdom must make a deal with Egypt regarding arms. From then on, the arms of the Soviet Union must then flow from there to Northern Africa until it reaches Sudan, where the first holy city is at. And then there are some remarks regarding then beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, then it's Congo, with this wealth of riches, and then lots of rare minerals where then can be used for technological advances. So the time for separation is absolutely Thursday, after many years and centuries of joining up together. Then it is a time for them to separate, because the expenses coming in the near future, they are very great. So then, with a bit they have thus far linking up with China, becomes then very promising for the future. If they remain with Great Britain and then wars going on, their wealth is going to be absolutely squandered, as they obviously did during the time of the Gulf War. So then, many decisions have to be made. Understandably, London has already the yen, the Chinese yen, as a means of exchange. So the whole situation is leading towards it. So it will be very wise for Scotland then to separate from Great Britain and join up with China, and then obviously constructing their own military, their own monetary system, and their own postal service. But they have already a customer for their wealth. Oil and gas China can buy from them, while helping them stabilize themselves in the region and then becoming a very strong partner with China. So then, situation is resolved. As we read the holy instructions, then obviously gives us a very important step forward in events coming. Next time we're going to evaluate these further as new developments then shows up, and then we find the covenant linked with it, because there is the understanding of the covenant and the false savior. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.